All right, so picking up where our heroes left off, Paul and you coordinated the LDF, MDF file transfers to E1 Dev 01, or DevDB, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
and the files are there. Have you already done a restore of those?
Yes. So there were two possible ways to do a restore. One is where you provide the MDB and LDB, the data and log files. But the one that he actually provided was a SQL backup. So
Oh, crap.
it was a native SQL backup file.
Okay. Okay, never mind.
Which is this guy right here. So he just put that out in the C temp drive, and then all I did was database restore and pointed at that back file.
Yep. And then you select.
I actually made a new one, so I restored it as PDKMS. So
Okay.
This is the point where we would have left off with no other changes after that. So.
Okay.
So
you can't, like, SQL Server is funny when you try to restore it to an existing server, existing database with a different name, isn't it?
Once you get to a back file or MDF, MDB, LDB files, it really doesn't care. As long as they were detached at the same time and the integrity is there,
yeah,
you can move databases from one to the other. That's actually how we moved all of your dev and test these other databases from ours, is we just simply detached them, copied them over to yours, and attached them.
Okay.
So the SQL doesn't care about it, but underneath it, permissions and all of that, yeah, they get all wonky. So that's really what the scripts are that we're rerunning.
Okay. I see.
All right, so yeah, so what I did, just to replay, I did restore database, and I wanted to call it the new one from device. And then I browsed to that folder, that
Yep.
back file.
Nice.
And then to verify it, right here, this is it confirmed that it is actually a native SQL backup and that it could restore it.
Cool.
And then I overrode the paths to the E drive where I wanted to restore it. And then this is where the question was about point-in-time restore. If we did really want to, because that backup was as of, I think, midnight on the 30th. If we said we wanted to restore to 7:35 a.m., then we would actually flip through one of these other two modes where the database doesn't actually open up, but then you can layer on subsequent hourly backups to restore to a certain point in time or a full hourly backup.
Okay. Because I haven't done the hourly transaction log application, does it then ask you for that set of files subsequent if you select that option?
You actually, because this database doesn't have the history of it, they were all done offline, you actually have to lay them in individually in sequence.
Okay.
If anything is out of the LSN numbers or out of sequence, it'll tell you and you're dead in the water. So if you lose one, that's as far as you can go.
As far as you can go, yep.
Yep. But I usually do those through SQL commands where you just, if you got 15 files, you build 15 commands to restore. And then, like I was saying, if you're trying to do point in time, the very last restore, you actually are very explicit to the time stamp that you want to restore as of.
Okay.
Those are things you hope you never have to do, but that's, DBAs get to do that every once in a while.
Yes.
So I won't go too far into that. That's, I would expect.
Yeah, it's a little off the trails. Thanks.
Yep. So that's what I did, overrode the paths to E and clicked OK. And I think about half hour, 45 minutes later, it finished. And now I have this database called PDKMS.
Yes.
Which has, I'll make some notes here. So these were all of the users from the production server, and a number of them are broken, which is expected as you move from SQL Server to SQL Server. But the way the JDE client works for the training environment, there's really only 3 logins that are actually that important. First one is the JDE account. And then the other 2 are the table owners. So if you look at PDKMS, there's really 2 table owners. There's ProdCTL and there's ProdDTA. And those guys, they don't actually connect, but they own schema. So really those are the ones that must be reattached. But typically when I refresh a database, I'll just reattach all of the ones here that are of significance, which are usually the internal JDE ones. And if you use Insight against the test environment, I don't think so, but the DB proxies, because TRKMS, my understanding is it's not integrated to anything, these don't actually apply. So if you were restoring, let's say, the dev environment or BA KMS, much more complicated because they're integrated. So typically what we did is you would have to restore JDE, you would have to restore SQViews, you would have to restore SQSite because it's integrated with order numbers and item numbers and all that. You probably would integrate to CRM because CRM's tied to web through web IDs. It's kind of a cascading effect. So when you restore dev environment, you're pretty much refreshing every related system to that same point in time.
Wow.
To keep the integrity of a valid test environment.
Right. At that point, the hour lease might actually become applicable.
Yes. Yeah, or you just, if you are working with an offshore team, you just request them not to make any changes or something like that. And then you just pick a time when nobody's transacting, nobody's releasing orders. Ideally, your minimal customer load when they'd be on the website quoting and things like that. And then just pick that as your point in time to restore all the environments. And then contact Microsoft Cloud folks to get a backup as of that date and time. If they're not able to do it, then you're really governed probably by them. If they say, hey, we can give you a point in time backup from 8 p.m., then that's your limiting factor.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so so the database is there, the tables and content are there, but the JD client is not usable. So I'm actually going to go look at the old database, which we will be. Do we need to retain it, or am I able to just overwrite it?
You can overwrite it.
Okay. All right, so what I'll do is I'll just detach it for now, and then we can delete it separately. But I'm going to make notes about who's in there right now. That's attached. So you've got, these are the main 2 that we're going to need to connect along with, so the schema owners plus the JDE client. And these probably are not important for TRKMS because it's isolated. It looks like Ben has discrete rights. Alicia does. And a bunch of other junk that never got removed after the separation. So I'll grab a copy of this in Paintbrush. There we go. Okay, so from a DBA perspective, what we're going to do is really detach this database.
Okay.
Then we're going to detach this database, rename the files, and reattach it as TRKMS.
Okay.
So if I knew last night that we weren't keeping this, I would have just restored it as TRKMS, but we didn't do that. So
I think it's good to just to have it as a just in case if we can. So
somebody is in there. Actually, 9 people are in there. So
let's see.
Let me go see who the people are. So will not be one of them. So we're going to be restoring TRKMS, which is database ID 7. So we'll go look and see sys processes, which are currently in the default context of 7. And we'll grab host name. And it looks like we have, so I think that's Alicia's virtual machine. This one is me, some of the integrity reports I was running. And I'm not familiar with 1010.
What's the last time they connected? Do you know?
Yes.
30th? That was yesterday.
Yeah, 144, last batch at 3:30. It's very likely we can just detach them. It's not a huge deal. I also like to look at the processes to see what's going on. So yeah, most of them are management studio, people running queries, except for these 4, which may be based on PID.
Okay.
Not an NT user, they're the JDE. So she's got a JDE client running that's logged into TRKMS.
Okay.
And let's go look at the last queries on those guys. Those were all yesterday, so I think it's probably safe to just terminate all of these connections. Which I think I can just do in the detach command. So there we go. That's pretty easy. Detach completed successfully. Okay, and we'll go detach the new one, PDKMS. And that's it. So not available right now through the SQL query client. And what I like to do is go rename the file so there's no mistaking that these are no longer active, and then we'll come back and delete them later. So those are the original TRKMS database, which was 170 gigabytes. That's the old one, and the new one is all on the E drive, the new drive that Paul created, and it's 190 gigabytes. Now we're just going to simply rename the files. SQL has detached them, has no locking on them, and doesn't care about them. All right, renamed. Now we go back to SQL and attach them. And we browse to the location of the MDF, and it's unhappy because that's not what it last remembered itself being and its related files.
Yes. Oops. Excuse me.
Shoot. The right number of L's is always helpful. There we go. Right, and here's where it's asking what you want to attach it as, and we're renaming it here to the other database, and then the owner on SQL 2000, it's pretty much always SA. There we go. Not too tough. Now we've waltzed the tables around, and we're still left in this situation where all the owners for prod, all of these owners are still prod because this was a direct backup of prod. So you guys have multiple environments and the owners. So production is typically prod DTA, prod CTL. Your dev environment is test DTA, test CTL. It'll be a KMS environment is BTST, DTA, BTST, CTL. And then TR actually reuses the test ownership.
And this is all in your head. Awesome, man.
Right.
It's like this Rolodex just like spinning. Just picture all these little guys in your head, like just retrieving data for you. I have this friend, she's an artist, and so she performs. She's done like 8 albums. She's been an artist for like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Apples has a big following. But people love her old songs. So when she gets to that point of her concert where she opens it up, people start calling out songs, and she'll try her best to reach back into the archives.
Oh.
But she'll brain freeze a lot, and like mid song, she's like, I just forgot my words. And she has this like really charming way of handling it. She's like, there's this little guy in my head. He's just like sweating right now. He's like running around trying to like find all the words.
Nice.
And he does it endearingly, and everyone loves it. No one ever like boos or punishes her for forgetting her own songs.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, she wrote them. I think she's entitled to doing that.
Exactly. So, she was actually one of the reasons we moved to the Twin Cities. She and her husband, they used to own like one of the big houses in the suburbs, and they moved to St. Paul to like an 800 square foot like shotgun style house.
Mm-hmm.
And then they bought like an old church, it just wasn't actively being used, so it's literally like 3 doors down from them, and they've turned it to like this art space, and they just invite in like musicians and playwrights, and it's like this really creative space called Art House North in St. Paul. So it's pretty cool. So if you get a chance, Google it sometime.
Okay. Oh, that sounds fun. I like the story too. Okay, so I'm now going to the URL I shared in the email, which is your E1 Deploy 01 server. There's a folder on there that was provided by JD Edwards at the time for our use to do this sort of work. So I will go in and open those, and we'll go into Query Analyzer and start working on them. So TRKMS is a valid data source. And the first thing I was talking about is the users. So we're gonna, I don't think I can I can multi-select these. That's nice. I guess I'm not familiar with who all of these logins are, so, but I don't think the production login should have access to TR. I'm not sure. There weren't any AD group-based access rights to this database. So previously, Ben Houston, my login, and Alicia were the ones that had SQL access into this. So I think I typically would try to match that and get rid of the other unnecessary stuff here. Charlene's probably not doing a lot of SQL updates for you. Okay, let's see. Gator DSI is not going to connect here. All right, so and actually looks like prod.ctl did reattach. So internally, it must have the same ID as your production server, which is a good thing. So first script is called align users.
Okay.
That's exactly what it does. Is these are all SQL permission users. They're not the AD based ones.
Yes.
And it will go through and just tell you what they are. It's a script that builds a script.
There's some sort of philosophical thing to be derived from what you just said.
Yes. So it's a SQL query that builds a SQL query that you run in the other window. And this will then go reattach JD Edwards.
Okay. I'll schedule something. No, it's all good.
Prod DTA should already be reattached. Test is going to be relinked. Okay. Prod CTL I think was okay. Test CTL is the other important one. And then we'll just do these for fun. Okay. And now when I refresh this list, you should see this login name column populate, which means
Test detail, test detail are back.
yep. So these are all reassociated now to the SQL logins behind those. So if we looked at test DTA, for example, databases that it has access to now should include TRKMS. So before we ran that script, it would actually you'd be able to log in as that user, but it couldn't actually switch to the database or access any resources.
Okay.
So that is the first step to get all the users realigned. Now, the second step is to change the owner of
I
table.
didn't realize those users lived at the database level. I always thought it was at the database engine level.
It's both. So this security section down here
Yes.
is server level, which is really the front keys at the front door.
Right.
And then for each database, these are the users that have, and this is their related login name,
Right.
have access to this individual database.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. So now what we have to do is take all of these tables and change them from prod DTA to prod CTL. There's an app for that. So we'll go build this guy. So this script needs to be altered based on our conditions. So we're moving from this to this. So what we need to do is find all of you're going to set the owner destination to be test CTL. And it's going to go through and find, owner prod destination test. And this is, again, a script that builds a script.
Nice.
There you go. Which is just changing the owner from prod CTL to test CTL.
Cool.
So we'll grab these. Copy, window 2, paste, and run. Warning, yes, it can break stuff. All right, that one's done. So if we come back here, we'll see if some subset of the tables should have changed. All the ones that were CTL should now be test CTL. And then we repeat the same process for the other owner, which is prod DTA. Run the script. Don't know what that is. Something maybe related to DC Link. Grab these. Window 2. Paste. Run. So it takes a couple seconds. I may have done this just a few times. Since we have dev, test, prod, training for RazorSync, KMS, real estate, and Equus. And every time we refresh them, we need, so we got at least 16 environments, and every time we refresh, we see.
You manage a separate environment for the real estate business?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
We literally spun it up in October because, do you know where the data was? PDK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had started logging some real estate transactions in PDKMS. So, and apparently that's not part of Wayzata Home Products. It's part of Wayzata Holdings, which this is great. We just learned about this like in September, and we're like, oh crap, we've got some more work to do.
You were doing that in the midst of like helping us separate? I have no idea how you do it, man. That's very impressive.
Yeah, a lot of fun. All right, so I think that looks like that finished. So we refresh again, and everybody here should be test DTA, test CTL, other than some weird internal objects. Yeah, okay. So that's step 1 was aligning the users. Step 2 is changing the owners, and step 3 is now granting permissions back. So permissions usually get whacked when you change the table owner. So we're going to run a third that builds a script. And this one is granting references to a SQL role we called EQ role JD internal, which doesn't really matter about the EQ bit, but we have to replace it for test CTL and test DTA. And this one's got 2 references to this. So build that, and it's just literally building thousands of grant permissions.
On the stored procs?
Sure.
On the tables. So JDE doesn't really use stored procs. So these are all the discrete tables that, so 2,300 tables in JDE here.
Is this, just a quick question, Ted. I know permissions for SQL Server in 2000s evolved quite a bit in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know enough to say we don't have to do it at the object level once we move to a newer version of SQL, right?
So this is one approach is just to make test DTA an owner of the database. That would solve everything. I'm just not a big fan of granting owner to anybody. So,
okay.
And that's really the hard
permission. I mean, you just read and write, right?
Well, sometimes as the OMW person, you're building indexes, you're adding columns, you may be dropping a table and recreating a table. So those are actually limited by doing this, which is preferred.
Oh, I know, but couldn't you just select DB writer, DB reader?
Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like everything you're doing is totally kosher. I'm just trying to process this pattern versus like, whatever new SQL Server patterns.
Yeah, and honestly, the newer versions of JD Edwards, they may have other best practices around this. So we're repeating what was done when we went live, and it's worked thus far. So
yeah. No, and I'm just trying to, because I've been bumping into how to assign stored proc execute privileges.
Yeah,
and that's just like a big ouch. It's definitely object level.
Yep. Or you grant owner, and then it implies they can execute everything.
I know that's not ideal either. I'm in the same campus. I don't prefer to owner.
It depends on which environment. So, like on the SSRS environment, we actually told our developers to do a grant exec on to public, right in the source control, so that every time you deploy, each deployment is actually putting the permissions into the database.
Nice. Very nice.
And if that's, there can be, depending on what version of SQL you're on, that can mean different things. So in SQL 2000, if you have permissions to execute the stored proc, but you don't have access to the underlying tables, it'll fail.
Okay.
But in the newer releases of SQL, they've kind of let you do it either way. Where if you can execute the proc, it sort of implies that you get access
to sub-objects.
So it's a lot of kludges here for this old release of SQL. Right, so we're going to run the grant permissions on the control tables here. Correct. Theoretically, that's it. So the JD users reattached. That's the one that the FAT client will connect from.
That's great, Todd.
So
I think this is really helpful for me. I wasn't sure if there was additional configs that had to happen at let's call it the CNC app level, but this is all like good common sense, like SQL Server
Hmm.
like database restore activity to me.
Yep. Because this was an existing environment, that's we don't have to deal with any of the CNC stuff.
Got it.
But if we were creating a new one, oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
There's a lot more at the app tier. So this one we can really kind of like focus our work in terms of moving the data and then reattaching all of the users and then the associated privileges of those users. It's kind of like the 3 scenes in that movie.
Yes, and then depending on what you find in that original database, ideally you try to realign what was there.
Right. Yeah. So exploring the target that you're restoring, making sure you kind of like create your audit or list of things that you're trying to fix.
Yep.
Cool.
And there we go. We logged in, and theoretically this should be as of last night. So let's go see what our recent sales order number is. 119519. Does that sound like a pretty fresh order?
I can't answer that believably. I could say yes or no, and I'd be shooting in the dark.
19518. RMA from January 29th, 345. So pretty fresh.
Nice. What?
So at this point, sometimes after a refresh, people will do things like set the next number ranges so you're in the test environment. It's kind of personal preference.
Wait, can you say that again?
So if you, some people, if you're in production or if you see production order numbers, sometimes they can get mixed up with the test order numbers. So, if in TR, if you start making orders, test orders and stuff, you'll get numbers that are right in sequence with production. If you print documentation, could get mixed up with, if you're also working with production data, they get mixed up with those order numbers. So sometimes people will just, force a high order number or something.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Non-production environment, so you can differentiate them easily.
I see. That's smart. Thank you for that advice. I appreciate that.
Other than that, there is one other thing which is kind of tedious. And you're actually, you are using the JD client. There were some SQL views that have been produced. Flip back to the SQL server here. I don't know where those are all being stored. Okay, so there are these views here, 7 of them or so. These all need to be have their table references changed. So when we changed, so for example here, prod DTA, what I typically do is have all of these views in a source control repository, and I will just go open each one, search and replace those same 2 changes, prod DTA to test DTA, and then re-execute them. And what they do is they drop the view and they recreate the view with the new table references. But I don't have access to those, so I'm not sure how important those are going to be, because these views here, all of these are used by DSI. So for the TR environment, I don't think this means anything. But if you were restoring BA KMS, that's the one that the dev DSI associates to. Nothing will work right if you start trying to use put or replen requests or putaways or availability by location. Those scripts are all dependent on these views.
Got it. So is this part, a standard part of the DSI, kind of call it a development approach? It's terminaling into a TSI call it interface or harness stub that ultimately invokes a call to one of these. Is that a common pattern?
So the DSI is sort of a middleware that has the ability to call JDE business functions. So just like the JDE Fact Client, but
Okay.
it has a different. The way the JDE Fact Client works is much more interactive. It's kind of little calls to get data, or I need this formatted. I'll go make a call and get it formatted.
Mm-hmm.
DSI is tipped a lot heavier towards I'm going to prompt you for everything I possibly need and then try to make one call
Okay.
to a certain function like confirm a movement or something. And if there's a problem, it'll come back and tell me all of the errors that were, you didn't give me this or this or this. It tries to wrap it all so it's not, you don't have to like piecemeal send it one thing and it comes back and says, okay, here's what I want next, because there's so many possible branches that it could go through.
Yes.
It rather collects everything up front.
Like
Like,
describes a pattern.
yeah. Yep. So for like transfers and stuff, it's going to say, where are you coming from? Where are you going to? What's the lot number? What's the quantity? Okay. I will go try to do that. And if I have a problem, I'll let you know. If it was successful, I'll let you know. That's
Okay.
a call. So it has the ability to, again, call any JDE business function. And we've written a number for DSI specifically, but it also has that ability to call read-only to select from any of the tables or views in the JDA database. So, for example, a couple of these views are for a lot of aggregation around all of the picks for a given SO so that it groups them together and you can kind of pick an order at a time. That's a lot easier to do in a SQL view than to try to iterate through stuff in a DSI script.
Mm. Mm.
But we didn't want to necessarily write a whole business function just to do that aggregation either, because it's, yeah, it's, again, there's several approaches to skin the cat. It's just, this is the one we picked and it's been pretty reliable.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Todd, I always learn so much from you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, don't mind knowledge transfer. It's you guys need to be prepared to do this level of support that we've been doing all these years, and so I can at least tell you what we did and where we were at, and obviously there's a lot of directions forward if you guys are going to 9.2. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope at some point we can share learnings back with you. I mean, hopefully it's not us always pulling information from you. So we'll
I'm hoping we follow your path too to 9.2. So I'd love to learn about, even the approach that Leisha was talking about, where it's maybe module by module that you move rather than the big bang. So.
Oh yeah, starting with finance and then roll out from there.
Mm-hmm.
Probably after that, sales order management, and then the beast that is warehouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to hear about the approach and the kind of the integration points that you did between the systems, and honestly, if you provided us copies of the code, a lot of that stuff is going to be exactly what we need. So
actually, that's a great point. We'll be sure to check that into a repo. Give you access, dude. You can pull that down all day long. Okay. Thanks for that, making that connecting point for me. So I understand that we can implement that way.
Excellent.
All right, Todd. Appreciate your time. Thanks for helping us restore this environment. Would you mind sending out an email? 'Cause I don't want to take credit for your work primarily. I think you should send out the good news email.
Okay. Yeah, I'll reply to the group, say it's done, and then as far as subsequent testing and so on, just should I step back and let Leisha kind of lead that process and the validation, or between her and Ben?
I think they should do the execution on that. I think having your kind of call it peer review just in the stand-up helps a lot. I think it helps build confidence for me and Andy to know that you're involved.
Okay. Excellent. Well, let me know if if I see something kind of heading off the rails are different than what I'm expecting, I'll certainly reply, but I'll just sort of keep reading and see if there's anything else I can contribute. Otherwise, I'll really let you guys run the show.
Fantastic. Thanks, Todd.
Very good. Thanks, Anthony.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see you.